Hi, Lainey. Welcome to the College Advisor YouTube channel. I appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And uh,
Absolutely.
and Happy New Year. Let's hope
Happy
it's a
New Year
good
to
one
you.
for all of us.
Absolutely.
Um, Lainey Donnell, you are an educational therapist, correct?
Yes,
And also
correct.
an independent educational consultant, just like I am an
Yes.
IEC.
hmm
And I wanted to talk to you today because I think it's really important for parents and kids, teens, if they're willing to watch this, is to understand. I hear the words executive functioning thrown around, and I wanted you to maybe define that so that people can understand that. But before that, I always like to ask people maybe to do a little more in depth about what you do and also how did you get into this field? Was it a straight path or was it a lot
No.
of twists and turns? Because the other reason I ask that, I think it's important for teens to understand that we didn't all get to where we are just like straight out of the gate and that,
You make such a good point. I mean, that's like, I was literally just on a call with a student who is struggling. And I said, like, not every path looks the same. It is
no,
zigzaggy, and it's not just as a teen or early 20s, it goes on forever.
to through,
Adulting and pre-adulting is very messy. And
right.
anyone who tells you otherwise is not actually living a life. So,
No. And
yeah,
I also think what I tell kids too, when I've had a girl once crying because she didn't know what she wanted to major in. Everybody
yes,
else knew. And I said, the beauty of going to college and learning is you're learning about different things and just being open to talking to people because that's often what leads you to something unexpected.
truly, that's absolutely true. So I was a student with learning disabilities growing up, and I never really envisioned college as like part of my future. I didn't know really if that was going to be something that I could achieve.
Okay.
Um, and then I did. And then I got into college, and my number one choice, early decision, University of Vermont, go Catamounts. And it was just the most perfect fit for me. And something clicked when I got there that I had always had support because I was a student who didn't have strong executive function skills, and I needed to be explicitly taught how to learn, how my brain works, how
Okay.
do I approach self-advocacy, how to, and learning how to use my strengths to compensate for my challenges.
Okay.
Um, and so when I got to college, everything kind of clicked. I
Okay.
don't know. I do think it had something to do with the fact that, like, because I'm ADHD, we often do very well when we get to focus on our interests.
Right.
Um, and so I was very focused on psychology and I was fascinated by it. And so I just, anything having to do with psych, the clubs, the classes, the independent studies, working with professors, all of it just totally excited me. Um,
Okay.
and so from there, I was very much, this is going to be kind of long-winded, so maybe I'm not going to go through the whole thing,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I wound up living in New York and working for the district attorney as a trial assistant, and then came back to Los Angeles and started teaching.
Okay.
I actually was a teaching assistant at a school for kids with diagnosed learning disabilities or differences, however you like
Right.
to say it. I,
Right.
I grew up in a different time where it was called a learning disability. Now we call
Same.
them differences.
Right.
Um, and so I kind of fell in love with teaching middle and high school. And ironically, as a dyslexic person, I actually taught English. And I actually also taught transition. I worked with the seniors on
Okay.
transitioning. And that was like my first foray into, um, students doing, post. high school transition. So whether that
Okay.
was a technical school or college or community college, whatever it looked like, or a job, it was just exploring like how, with your neurodivergence, how do you go out into the world and access support and access and let people know what kind of support you need without feeling embarrassed. So it was a lot of that. And then when I was in the classroom for about 8 years and then left the classroom and went into private practice in ed therapy. But again, my focus has always been middle, high school, and college. And
Okay.
so it kind of, for years, it kind of lent itself to helping through the college process. I teach writing. And
Okay.
so I, oftentimes, for years, students would hire college counselors and then bring me all the work that actually needed to get completed for the college counselor.
Right.
And I know at that point, I knew a little bit more about what these kids needed.
Right.
Um, and then they started referring me to students who didn't have any need, but just, was like, I like her.
Okay.
Um, and that's where it all kind of blossomed from there. Went back to UCLA, got my
Certification.
certification,
Right.
and then, here I am. I've kind of got this ed therapy practice.
Right.
And I co-own a company that is very focused also on executive function tools, Lila Learning. We go
Okay.
into schools and we teach, usually, hopefully, pre-service teachers, but also teachers about how to implement executive function strategies within the classroom.
Okay.
Um, and then I work on my private practice, which is ed therapy and then college counseling. So,
Okay.
and I have two kids and a husband.
Okay.
I'm a little
Okay.
busy.
A little busy, a lot busy,
Yeah.
especially in the summer months, fall season. Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So, okay, I know you said executive function. You've mentioned it a couple times. You kind
Yes.
of talked about it briefly, your own sort of journey, but can you define it so
Yeah.
that, including
Yes.
myself, who should know exactly what it is, but
It's okay.
it's a short two words for a
A big
big,
set of skills. It
yes,
is a
thank
it
you.
is a set of skills that include things like cognitive flexibility. Okay, so cognitive flexibility is the ability to um, look at something and make a change. So, for example, you want to study for a test, but however you studied last time didn't work very well. And
Right.
so, doing the same thing over again doesn't seem like the best choice, but you need cognitive flexibility to be able to, and metacognition, thinking about your own thinking, to
Okay.
be able to look at that situation and go, I'm not going to do flashcards this time. Maybe this time I'm going to rewrite my notes and put it into Quizlet, at, whatever that is. So we've
Okay.
got metacognition and we've got cognitive flexibility. We have time management and prioritizing, which as well as I do. I feel like college, that's it. It is time
Yeah.
management. If you
Yeah.
can if you can manage your time and prioritize tasks, that's most of the battle, right? You
Right.
can
You're
almost conquer
golden.
anything. Right. And if you don't have those skills, often that's where we see students, fall flat on their face. So with time management and prioritizing tasks, oftentimes, so if you have ADHD, then you have executive function issues, but you can have executive function issues without having ADHD.
Okay.
Um, but if you are someone with ADHD, you also struggle in this area because you struggle with what's called task initiation.
Okay.
So someone with an executive function issue, and especially ADHD, they are really going to struggle with task initiation when it's a non-preferred task.
Okay.
Um, that is why oftentimes, I know this is a little tangential, but
That's okay.
ADHD is often looked at as it looks like a disorder of choice because the two times that you can really pay attention is if it's high interest
Right.
or if the consequence is so dire or something that you really want to avoid, you get it done. So that's why we have our last minute Larrys and our last minute Lacey's who
I
are
like
getting
that,
things
Larry and
done,
Lacey.
who are getting things done at 10 o'clock the night before. And
Right,
that often works for a short time, but not forever. And especially for kids in college where the workload gets too big and the risk gets too great. And
right.
so I think so we talked about planning, prioritizing, cognitive flexibility, metacognition, time management, task management. So it's what you can think of it as, it's executive function. So you can kind of think of it, it's all happening right here in your frontal lobe. And you
Okay.
can kind of think of it like the conductor of your brain. So you can imagine, and I teach this to my students too, you can imagine that there's like a little conductor, and the conductor is responsible for bringing in the violins, pushing them back out, bringing in
Right.
percussion, pushing, percussion back out. And so we've got this little conductor who is basically helping us to make the choices, think through, oh, if I do this now, then I will, succeed later or whatever. And
Okay.
so sometimes you can have like a really crazy conductor, and sometimes you can have like a really calm conductor, which we've
Right.
all, if you've attended any sort of concert, and with a conductor, you see that.
Yes.
Um, so the conductor of our brain, of our tasks, you can think of it as an executive, right? An executive knows when it's time to take on a task themselves versus, delegate that
Delegate
task. So that's that whole idea of like
or
the
asking
executive
somebody for help.
knowing when you need help, and metacognition, knowing when you don't know, thinking
Yeah.
about your own thinking and being aware.
Right.
A lot of times we have these students when they're younger, they go to their teacher and they say, I don't get it. And the teachers often say, what don't you get? And they have
Right.
no idea where the breakdown happened.
Right.
And so they're like, I don't know. And that's frustrating for the teacher because they'd like to target what the student doesn't get. But the student doesn't really have the ability to think about like where it broke down. So
Recognize I need help on this is X,
here,
Y, and Z. And I would imagine too, when you talk about the frontal lobe, and again, we don't want to digress too much, but I think it doesn't close all the way till you're
oh, this is the
25.
worst part. I
Right.
mean,
And so,
when you're between like 22 and to like 29, 30. But if you're
right,
looking with someone who has ADHD,
it's
um,
it's
then
even
it's
later.
on average, you're looking at reducing that by 3 years at any point in time.
Okay.
So these are kids, who are going to school with
Mhm.
not fully formed frontal lobes.
Brains. And a lot of that, I know with my own kids and with students, we all say to them, well, you need to get more organized or you need to study harder because you didn't do well. But when you, on also, I think on a teacher, parent, whoever, the adult end of it, instead of saying, well, just study harder, that doesn't teach them anything, right? And so
Yeah,
that's where when a parent hires you or somebody somewhere who can help a student, a teenager, a kid, give them those skills, that's such a
right.
gift to give them because they are trying, but it looks like they're not
Oh
potentially.
yeah, yeah. And my least favorite word is lazy, and I hear it
Yeah,
all the time. And
yeah,
I really like philosophically, I really come from a place of like every student wants to do well, and if they're
yeah,
not, there's a reason. No student wants to be failing or wants to be struggling or disappointing their teachers or their parents.
right.
And so if again if it isn't happening and we've got intact intellect, then there's another reason, there's another piece of the puzzle that we're missing.
Right. So, like all of us, we have different skills, different challenges, intelligences. How do parents recognize some of this stuff?
um
How do they
so
know they
so
need
yeah,
help or
well, I
guidance?
think so there's a few different things. So in my experience, a lot of times parents do more often than not, parents see it. They see that there's a piece of the puzzle that isn't clicking. And
Okay.
oftentimes they'll listen to this gut and they'll go to the teacher. And the teacher will say, "No, everything's fine. I don't
Right.
see anything." And in no way, shape, or form am I throwing teachers under the bus.
No, no, no.
This is not necessarily their area of expertise. And this is where teacher preparation programs often fail our teachers in
Sure.
helping them to they don't need to be the diagnosticians. They don't need to be the people who bring it to the table, but recognizing signs, I think, is the piece of the puzzle that needs to we need to do better for them. Um, and so I think so sometimes I think parents know it in their gut. They go to a teacher says everything's fine, and then they just kind of leave it. And
Right.
then for years, they struggle. And so sometimes I see you know, kids who come to me in 10th and 11th grade or 11th
Mhm.
and 12th grade, and all of a sudden they have the ADHD diagnosis or they're struggling with, executive function. And they're like, oh, we've always struggled with this, but he got by. That is the other piece is that
Right.
oftentimes, you know, expectations change throughout school. And so
Sure.
it's not always obvious that, especially in girls, or I should say, especially in inattentive type ADHD, where you just kind of fly under the radar. And
Yeah.
when expectations start shifting, that's when alarms start going off.
Okay.
A different set of skills necessary for, you start chemistry, and then all of a sudden with chemistry, you've got to integrate all this knowledge that you did in class, and you've got these multi-step, labs to write up.
Sure.
And it's a different kind of writing, and where you've been doing narrative writing in English or in social studies, and now you've got to switch to this science brain. And so oftentimes we see students really struggle with integrating this new kind of writing.
Sure.
So I think that, I always encourage parents to like trust their gut, and
Okay.
keep asking questions. And if you feel like something is off and your teacher thinks it's all good, you can always request meetings with
Sure.
your admin or whatever. Like, ask the questions. Don't Your child needs to learn what advocacy looks like.
Yeah.
And we know that our kids do as we do and not necessarily as we say. And so I feel like the most successful families are often the ones where the parent maybe was a little obnoxious or a little loud. There's no need to be like rude,
No, of course.
but making a little bit of noise and showing them, no, it's actually okay to speak up for yourself, and
Yeah.
modeling that behavior, because ultimately for these students, we want them to be able to advocate for themselves. Because if they are college bound students, we
Right.
want them to be able to walk into student support services and say, I'm struggling with this professor, or do you guys have anyone who can help me with blah blah blah.
Right.
Because in college, you're there by choice.
Right.
They will not be coming after you.
No,
Um,
no. You
and
have
so
to
it's
go up to the professor and say, I have
exactly
a 504 and da 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 da.
correct, correct. And so I
Right.
think it's really critical for, kids to, for families to um, you know, push for answers. And if you do get some answers, to have conversations. If there is some sort of diagnosis or testing or whatever it is, that needs to be shared with the student so that they understand that, I mean, they know, they
Yeah.
know that they maybe don't look like other kids in the class or
Sure.
behave like or perform like other kids. And
Right.
so I, my, the way I see it is that, yes, I know a lot of people struggle with labels. Labels gave me a lot of freedom to understand that, like, I wasn't doing something on purpose, and
Right.
that it was just how my brain was made. Um, and so I was able, it kind of released me from any guilt necessarily. And I'm able to say, like, okay, well, this is how my brain is made. And it's not an excuse as to why I can't do things. It's the
Right.
reason I have to do things a little different.
Right. And I understand that, having been a therapist with
Right.
kids and, kids that I've seen over the years and my own kids' struggles academically is that it's almost a sense of relief. Like, I'm not stupid. I'm not
That's it.
lazy. And I'm not dumb, which I
Yes.
think is the huge piece, which I kind of wanted. I think I didn't do this on purpose, but sort of one of my next questions is I saw it on your website about Howard Gardner's theories of multiple
Multiple
intelligences.
intelligences.
And
Yes.
maybe you can explain, because I think that's important to understand, because I think a lot, at least in our country, it's all very focused on those grades. And if you don't get A's, you don't get B's. And
I
even
know.
now, a B is like, oh, she got a B.
I know.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And that
No.
all of
I
our
think,
kids
no, go
have
ahead,
different
please.
abilities, and intelligence is can be measured in so many different ways.
And it's so interesting to be in the position that I'm in because like there are so many different intelligences. And as an ed therapist, like
Right.
I'm screaming from the mountaintop, about the different ways that you can be intelligent, right? Like you wouldn't call a plumber to teach you some new study strategies. That's where I come
Sure.
in. But you definitely wouldn't call me to come fix your plumbing. Like
Right.
so everyone has a niche and we have to respect that. But I think from the college counseling perspective, you know, somehow we're supposed to be, K through 12 education, we're supposed to be equally excellent in all areas.
Yeah.
And it's it's really, and then when you get out of 12, right, in America, then you're supposed to focus on something all of a
Right.
sudden. And so it's really like I think it's really hard for kids. And you were talking about before we got on, we were talking about kids who are trying to figure out a major and things like that.
Right.
They're depending on where they're coming from, they're not necessarily exposed to all that much.
No.
Even if it's a unique school that is giving, very interesting classes, they still fall within the social
Sure.
studies, science,
It's
math.
all very in a box, kind of. There's
Exactly,
not a lot
exactly.
of,
Yes. And so I think that, what Gardner talks about is like, yeah, we've got like interpersonal, strengths. We have intrapersonal strengths. We have people who, are incredible musically. We have people who are incredible, I think that I think the point is that somehow we have to come to this place where a strengths-based education um, is acceptable, and it's acceptable for kids to, and I see it here and there where I know years and years ago you were supposed to have taken every single AP. And
right.
now I think it's shifted a little bit that like if you're a science kid, try to push yourself in all the sciences,
Sure. Sure.
but you and I know that like ultimately they are still looking for the kid who took as many as of the hard classes as possible.
Sure.
And so I think if there was a way for us to shift towards, looking at each individual and helping them capitalize on their strengths, right?
Right.
Like there are some people who computers make perfect sense to them.
Right.
Um, they're going to be in a little bit of trouble in the next few years, but with AI. But I think that the point is that somehow we have to honor all of these different types of brains. That there's a reason we have teachers, there's a reason we have lawyers, there's a
Right.
reason we have therapists, et cetera,
And
et cetera, et cetera,
surgeons, right?
and surgeons. Exactly. And I think that, a lot of that gets lost on our high school kids. And then all of a sudden they're thrown into a situation where they're supposed to be specialized in something.
Yeah.
And I think it's too bad.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And look, not to bash the educational system, because
No, no, no,
there's,
no.
have 30, 40 kids in your class, and
No doubt. No
maybe
doubt.
you didn't
I'm
see that
talking.
I know. In
Yeah.
general, broad, I understand.
I think teachers are doing a really incredible job with what they are being given,
For
and
sure.
I have the utmost respect, utmost respect.
No, absolutely. Um, so how do you handle a kid who comes in who's been told, you never get anything done, you're lazy, or even if it's not said that bluntly to
Yeah.
a kid, and they come in and they already like, well, I'm not good at school and whatever they think they are. How do you not undo it, but how do you help them with that? And how should advice for parents of how to help them with that?
Um, I think number one for parents is validate how they feel,
Okay.
because you can spend time saying, no, you're so smart. No, no, you did this or whatever. That's not how they feel. They feel
Right.
dumb. And they feel the disconnect between their intellect and their performance. Because what oftentimes gets lost in these diagnoses, and if you're in public school, your 504, your IEP, what have you, what gets lost is helping the student understand the difference between intelligence and your learning disability. That it doesn't have anything to do. In fact, you can't really be diagnosed with a learning disability or ADHD unless you have average to above average intellect. So, as long as intellect is intact, I need students. One of my first stops is I need you to understand that this has nothing to do with how smart you are. This is
Yeah.
purely a functional issue of how things get done and travel around your brain.
Okay.
And the classroom environment um, focus, well, not all classroom environments, but a lot of classroom environments stays very focused on, one type of input and one type of output, right? There's a lot
Sure.
of talking and then there's a lot of regurgitating. It has
Right.
changed drastically over the years with, universal design for learning and flipped classrooms. And, there's all sorts of different things that schools are trying to accomplish to include more types of learners, which I really appreciate.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but I think that really understanding that um, how their brain works, that their smarts are intact. We just have to figure out how to express it, how to get it out of your brain, because it really comes down to neural pathways and
Okay.
which ones. The technical term are like is like myelinated, but really I just say paved. I just say like which ones are paved and which ones are rocky. You
Okay.
know, we go on a street in LA that, is full of potholes. Like
Right.
that's a hard path to travel and you're going to have some bumps and bruises. But if
Right.
we're on one of our smooth little streets out here in Thousand Oaks,
Right.
um, it's much easier to access places, right? And so
Okay.
those are our neural pathways.
Okay.
Um, and it just looks different, but the intelligence is intact.
Okay. So teaching kids that they're smart, it is,
Exactly. And
yeah.
validating. I mean,
Right.
you, to this day, I have very vivid memories of being in fourth grade and feeling like the dumbest person on this planet.
Yeah.
And I've succeeded like in most measures of the
Right.
world. Like I have succeeded. I have gotten multiple degrees and I am a very productive member of society. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend. I'm doing well.
Right.
Um, but that little girl lives very vibrantly in my heart. And those early experiences, we can't invalidate that for them. They have to know that, like, yeah, this is hard. And I hate that you're going through this and it
Right.
doesn't feel good. And I think validating and recognizing their perspective is really critical on the home front.
Wow, I love that. That's so
Yeah.
awesome. I just think it's so important. I think kids, they're all figuring out their ways and all of that. It's already hard enough to be a kid, let alone a teenager and social media and all of that stuff. But just to be validated, I think with
Yes.
anything is not half the battle, but it's a big
I,
piece of it.
it's a big piece of the battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
which I think kind of this is perfect onto the kind of the next segue is, I'm assuming you had support, being that fourth grade kid and the importance of finding a team to help the
Yes.
student and
Yes.
even and what should that look like? So somebody a parent recognizes or a kid comes to their parent and says, I'm just like trying so hard, nothing's working. My
Yeah.
friends can do it. I can't do it. I feel so stupid.
Yeah.
So they might call someone like you, or do they go to the schools first and
I
then,
think I think there's a lot of first stops. I think for some people, it's a pediatrician. For some people, it's a teacher. For some people, it's administration.
right,
Um, some people, it's me. Sometimes it's a tutor.
right,
Um, but I think that I loved how you said it about like the team getting like I, I feel like one of my strengths and one of the gifts that I was given was being taught to know when I don't know
yeah,
and being able to say I don't have the answer to this or I don't know how to do this but you do, so I need you to teach me or I need you to do something or whatever it is. And so I think parents who are, I have so much respect for the parents who pick up the phone and call me and say I don't know if I need you, but
right,
this is my issue. And so being able to, there is the Association of Educational Therapists, which is a nationwide
yeah,
organization. And so being able to, call and head therapists, and the theory is that then they can connect you like, okay, I might be the right person or I'm not the right person for this, but let me get you connected to this advocate. Or it
okay,
sounds like this is a occupational therapy issue. Or you know what? Let's get a tutor on board 2 or 3 times a week if that's something that we can do. And if it's not a tutor, then let's look at after school help at the YMCA or
right.
whatever exists. But I think that team approach and just picking up the phone and saying to someone, I don't know if you're the right person, but here's where I'm struggling. Can you help me get to the right place? Um, I think is a really, really important thing. And that
Yeah,
that can, I answer emails all the time, or I'm
right,
just like, I mean, the truth is I'm totally full right now, but I can say like I'm full, but why don't you email me, tell me what's going on, and let me see if I can get you to someone who can be of some assistance to you.
right, right. And
Right.
so once a kid has the services and a parent is, everybody's kind of learning and understanding, helping them get on the right path for them. Do you work in conjunction with the schools? Like, is that
Yeah.
important to
Yeah,
do?
so it becomes that team, right?
Yeah,
So if it's a public school, then I'm doing 504s and IEPs with them to make sure that we're on track. And also, I mean, not that it's totally kosher, but like I'm taking on some of the, I mean, you can't officially put me into the IEP as like one of the service providers.
sure.
Um, but I'm saying like, no, that's something I'm going to take on. I'm going to deal with that piece. So the school, and so it's really a collaboration with the school. I think
Okay.
that one of the greatest things for me is that I was a classroom teacher. And so I feel like I come in as an ed therapist, as like
Yeah.
someone who um, recognizes what it takes to run a full classroom. And I'm not there to dictate, I'm there to work with a teacher.
Right,
Um,
right.
and then, or if it's at a private school, then I'm working with the learning specialist and saying, or I'm emailing the teachers and saying, what's going on? How can I help? How can I support? And then when we get to the college portion, for students who are going to need services, then we're looking at what school is providing what services, how all encompassing are they? Is it a SALT program at Arizona?
Correct.
Or is the kind of program that I had at University of Vermont where I had my anything at my fingertips, but I just had to access it. I didn't have to pay more for it or anything like that.
Right.
Um, so, and also services are really evolving on college campuses. It's so interesting. This is the first semester, this fall semester, where a majority of my college students are getting their notes via AI, not an actual note taker. So now AI is recording it and
Oh,
they're
wow.
getting like an AI device or program, and that is what is giving them their copies of notes. Um,
Wow. A whole new
which
world,
a
right?
whole new, I mean, I got like the triplicate, it was on like three sheets of paper and
Yeah.
it had a piece of carbon copy. And then I'd like have to go to this learning center and pick up my notes, and it was a whole
Right.
thing. So my jury's still out. I still teach my students how to take notes in class because I don't want
Yeah.
them to not do that. But I'm teaching them to use it as a tool. So that way, when you've zoned out, whether it's a
Right.
processing issue or ADHD,
Or
that you
just
know where to
boring.
fill in, or boring, or a monotone
Sorry.
professor. Yes, absolutely.
Which, even if you don't have a learning difference,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hard to
Yep.
pay attention.
Yes.
So I don't know if you can answer this question,
Sure.
and maybe it's not even a question to answer, but when students start getting help, do you see, I don't want to say immediate results, but, and
It depends on the student.
I know you were going to say that because part of it depends, are they going to listen and try it? Because I'm sure, when a doctor gives you medication for something, sometimes it's not the right. Like when if you get a flu shot, it's kind of, it'll protect you from some strains, not others. So I would imagine it's similar to the tools that you offer to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it totally depends on the student. I do find that the older the student, the faster the success comes.
Okay.
Um, and more because there's even more buy-in. Because they are in a position where like there are real consequences to their success,
Right.
whether it's getting into college or getting a job or in college and wanting to
Or
be there
graduating high
or
school.
graduating high school. There are real
Sure.
consequences. But I wouldn't say that is I think I've had some students who, I start with an elementary school and see them through college. Last spring,
Wow.
I had a student um, who I had him starting in fourth grade, and I got to
Wow.
go to his USC graduation.
Oh,
And I had worked with all three of the brothers over the years,
uh-huh.
and he came out of the Coliseum and he handed me his diploma, and he's like,
Oh,
"Here you go." And I was like, "Oh,"
oh,
I was like, "We
I
share that,
wanna,
man."
I wanna
Yeah,
cry. That's awesome. It's
it's just
awesome.
it's just fun to see them evolve and come into their own, where like it's there. You see them through high school, you get them through the college process, and you see it. Like I can see it. I can see
Yeah,
where it's going. Um, and for some students, it's a little clearer than others, and other issues
sure.
come up here and there. But it's really special when they kind of find their path, like what we were talking about.
Right.
It was not an easy path by any means. I mean, it sounds like we were together from fourth grade, and then he went to USC.
Yeah,
He worked for that degree,
yeah,
and there were messy moments. And I think just like embracing the messy a little bit, and just knowing
right.
that you know, school isn't necessarily built for the neurodivergent,
No,
but it is perfectly achievable. Um,
right. And
yeah.
I think the thing to recognize too, or from what I've seen, is that these kids, I don't want to make it sound like these kids, but kids
Yeah.
with these different issues are probably working 2 to 3 times harder in a way to compensate. It's like if you break your leg, you got to hobble around on crutches. So to get from point A to point B is so much harder than if you're just skipping down the street, right?
Yeah. And then you think about the emotional impact of that.
Yeah,
And that's not included in any real, unless have an emotional disability, the emotional impact of a learning disability or ADHD isn't necessarily, measurable or examined until you've had the emotional impact.
right.
Um, I remember very clearly, like early on in my college education, feeling frustrated at how many hours it was taking me to accomplish reading,
Yeah.
and study. And what my friends were doing in an hour and a half was taking me 3 hours. And I kind of
Sure.
had this moment of like, okay, either accept this or, walk away. Like you can't
Right.
be angry about it because that's going to take up too much time. Um, and so that is a conversation that I often have with my students who are like, can I do college? Can I not do college? And
Right.
for so many of them, their intellect is just outstanding. It's just the
Sure.
output. And I'm like, I don't want to see you not go to college. We just have to like be okay knowing that it's not going to look exactly like the person sitting next to you.
Sure.
Um, and so, yeah,
Okay, that's great. So if you had to give three tips, your top three tips, and I could give you a second, either to kids and or to parents,
yeah.
and they
Um,
might be different for each, or even just one takeaway.
I think for parents, I think number one is validate and appreciate your kid's perspective of what they're going through, even though
Right.
it's hard to watch them hurt, you know. I think number two, know when you don't know and ask for help. Even if you're not
Sure.
sure what you're asking for, just say something isn't right and we need to figure this out.
Right.
Um, and then um, it's it's okay if their path looks different than your best friend's kid.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important, that more so now than ever, paths to success are varied. They look very different. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. We learn a lot from taking different paths. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think for students, I think it's a matter of, if you don't know how to manage your time, get some tools. Let's
Right.
figure out how to manage your time, because that will be the difference between success and failure in college. Time management.
Absolutely.
I think that that's really, really important. And just being willing to ask for help. That
Yes.
not everyone has every answer. And I have literally seen the difference between failure and success being asking for help.
Right.
Just ask for some help and get some support, because you're not a robot. You are not an
No.
AI machine. And
No.
we're
And
not
even
all
AI
perfect at
doesn't know
everything.
everything.
No, we
Even
definitely
I,
know that.
I try to tell kids my piece of advice to them along the lines of asking for help. It's a sign of strength, not weakness.
100%.
Because I've seen over and over again, as I'm sure you have too, kids just bury it. They're afraid to look at their grades. They don't want to tell their parents they got a D or an F and they let it slide. But then you're digging a deeper hole for
Much
yourself.
deeper hole.
And if you go to your parent or an adult that you trust and you think can guide you, that it's
Hmm.
super important. And most people want to help. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if they
They're
can't
there.
help adults, we want to give back to kids because we've all been through the struggle one
Yes.
way or another.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and you're
absolutely. And
they're
I
not
would.
alone in it.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, office hours exist for a reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're going to occasionally have a professor who's not really interested in
Yeah.
helping, but then there'll be someone else in your class or someone in the tutoring center who's willing to help.
Right.
And then the other two pieces of advice I always give my kids going off to college, whether there's a learning struggle or not, is walk the campus before the first day of school. Go find every single classroom, go find all the bathrooms near that
Yeah.
classroom, and know where you're going, so that the
Yeah.
first day of class, that anxiety is taken away. So find your
Right.
classrooms. And if you are a student that is going to get accommodations, chances are you're going to be emailing these professors. You need to go introduce yourself.
Yeah.
They need to be able to put a face to this name.
Right.
And you say, like, yes, I'm getting accommodations, but I'm here to work hard. And I just wanted to introduce myself. And I
Right.
think just laying that foundational relationship, I think is really, really critical.
Absolutely. And I think it's good to do regardless.
Yes, absolutely.
But
I
that's
mean,
for
that's the
another
difference.
story.
Yes,
But yeah,
absolutely.
is the professors, they're not getting paid that much. They're doing this because they want to teach and
Yes,
they
yes,
enjoy high school students, college, wherever they are. And I think if anything, you're giving them a gift by making their feel more fulfilled that they're actually helping you succeed.
I agree 100%. Absolutely.
That's easy
Yeah,
for us to say because we're
I
on the
know.
other end.
I know. I know. True. True.
Thank you, Lainey, so much
My
for
absolute
this
pleasure.
talk. I hope that when people watch this, they get something out of it, which I
Me
can't
too.
imagine they wouldn't. And thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.